There's a quiet misunderstanding that ruins a lot of relationships, and it usually isn't discovered until the damage is already done. It's the belief that affection automatically means attachment, that warmth equals love, that intensity means commitment. Before we go any further, if you're here for clarity instead of comfort, stay with the channel and make sure you're subscribed. What many men experience as love is often something else entirely. Not manipulation, not deception, but regulation. The human nervous system is constantly seeking balance. When it's overwhelmed, it looks outward. When it's understimulated, it looks for activation. And when it finds a person who can reliably shift its internal state, attachment forms quickly. That attachment can look like love, can feel deep, can feel exclusive, but it isn't always what it appears to be. Emotional regulation is powerful. The person who calms anxiety, stabilizes mood, or restores a sense of control becomes essential, not because of who they are, but because of what they provide. This is where confusion begins. A woman meets a man who makes her feel grounded. Her thoughts slow down around him. Her stress eases. Her emotions organize themselves more easily. She feels better with him than without him, and she calls that love. But feeling better is not the same as loving someone. It's loving the effect they have on your internal state. The nervous system doesn't differentiate between affection and relief. Relief feels like safety. Safety feels like attachment. And attachment feels like love. Until it doesn't. Pause for a moment here. This isn't about accusing anyone of using anyone else. Most people don't know they're doing this. Regulation happens below awareness. It's automatic, instinctive. The problem arises when regulation is mistaken for connection. Connection is mutual. Regulation is directional. When one person consistently absorbs emotional volatility, provides reassurance, manages anxiety, or stabilizes uncertainty, they become a resource. Resources are valued, but they are not always respected. Here's the contradiction most people miss. Being needed does not mean being chosen. Need is about relief. Choice is about desire. They can overlap, but they are not the same. When a woman is dysregulated, emotionally overwhelmed, uncertain, anxious, or insecure, she gravitates toward whatever calms the storm. That calming presence feels essential. But once the storm subsides, the attraction often shifts. Not because the man changed, because her internal state did. The nervous system no longer requires the same regulation. So the bond loosens. This is why some relationships feel intense early and strangely hollow later. The intensity wasn't love. It was relief. There's a subtle moment when this becomes visible. It's when her affection increases during stress and fades during calm. When she leans in during chaos and drifts during stability. Men often interpret this as moodiness or inconsistency. But it's a pattern. Regulation creates dependency. Dependency feels like closeness. But dependency without desire doesn't sustain respect. Another pause here. Think about how often affection spikes during crisis. Arguments followed by intimacy. Stress followed by closeness. Anxiety followed by reassurance. These cycles condition the nervous system to associate connection with dysregulation. So calm feels empty. Peace feels boring. Stability feels flat. And the person who provides regulation becomes less exciting once regulation is no longer needed. This is where men get trapped. They believe the solution is to provide more. More reassurance. More emotional labor. More availability. But regulation doesn't respond to quantity. It responds to imbalance. The more one person regulates, the more the other depends. And dependence quietly erodes attraction. There's a woman named Claire. She's emotionally intense, highly sensitive, quick to feel overwhelmed. She meets a man who is steady, predictable, calm. Around him, she feels safe. Her anxiety decreases. Her emotions settle. She becomes deeply attached. He believes this is love. Over time, he notices something shifting. She becomes less curious about him, less interested in his inner world, more reactive when he pulls back. She doesn't want him gone. She wants him functioning. When he stops regulating, tension returns. When he resumes, affection follows. That's not partnership. That's emotional outsourcing. And it's exhausting. Another realization that's difficult to accept. People often fall in love with how someone makes them feel about themselves, not with who that person actually is. Regulation improves self-experience. It doesn't automatically create relational depth. Depth requires mutual engagement, not one-sided stabilization. Here's where biology matters. The nervous system learns quickly. It associates relief with proximity, so it pulls toward the source of relief. But learning doesn't equal bonding. Bonding requires reciprocity. If one person is always calming and the other is always reacting, the dynamic becomes parent-child, not partner-partner. Desire doesn't thrive in caretaking roles. This is why men who are excellent emotional regulators often feel taken for granted over time. Their presence becomes assumed. Their effort becomes invisible. Because the nervous system adapts. What once felt special becomes baseline. Baseline doesn't inspire longing. This is another contradiction people avoid. Consistency creates trust. But overregulation without polarity reduces attraction. Polarity requires difference. Regulation collapses difference. When you're always smoothing, absorbing, stabilizing, you stop presenting tension. Without tension, desire has nothing to orient around. Another pause. This doesn't mean men should become emotionally unavailable. It means they shouldn't become emotional infrastructure. Infrastructure is relied upon, not desired. The danger isn't being supportive. It's being the sole regulator. Healthy relationships involve co-regulation. Both nervous systems adjust. Both provide stability. When regulation flows only one way, love slowly transforms into utility. And utility does not protect respect. This is why some men are shocked when they're left despite doing everything right. They provided. They supported. They stabilized. But they were never fully chosen. They were needed. Need ends when the need changes. Choice endures because it's not state-dependent. There's also the role of self-development here. As a woman becomes more regulated internally, through therapy, growth, or life changes, the external regulator becomes less necessary. If the relationship is built primarily on regulation, it weakens. If it's built on shared values, desire, and mutual curiosity, it adapts. Men who confuse being needed with being loved often miss this transition. They don't notice when affection shifts from curiosity to comfort, from desire to dependence. Comfort feels good, but it doesn't inspire pursuit. Here's the expectation-breaking truth. The more you make yourself indispensable, the more replaceable you become when circumstances change. Because indispensability based on function is fragile. When your role is to stabilize, someone else can eventually stabilize too. What can't be replaced is presence. Identity. Direction. Those don't regulate. They attract. Another reflection. Love doesn't calm the nervous system by default. It engages it. Regulation calms. Engagement activates. Healthy love contains both. But when calming becomes the primary function, engagement fades. This is why some relationships feel nurturing but sexless, supportive but stagnant, safe but disconnected. The nervous system isn't drawn to what it already has. It's drawn to what it hasn't integrated. Regulators become integrated quickly. Once integrated, they stop being felt. This is where resentment can quietly grow. The man feels used. The woman feels dissatisfied. Neither fully understands why. He says, "I gave you everything." She says, "Something's missing." They're both right. He gave regulation. She needed desire. Desire cannot be given. It emerges from polarity. And polarity requires two stable, self-regulating individuals choosing each other, not leaning on each other for balance. The final realization is uncomfortable but freeing. If she only loves how you regulate her, the relationship will always be conditional. Conditional on her emotional state. Conditional on stress levels. Conditional on circumstance. That's not love. That's reliance. Love remains when regulation is no longer required. Stays when things are calm. When there's no crisis to solve. No anxiety to manage. That's the test most relationships quietly fail. Once you see the difference between being loved and being used as a regulator, your choices change. You stop overfunctioning. You stop absorbing emotions that aren't yours. You allow space for mutual regulation instead of unilateral caretaking. And in that space, something important happens. Either real connection emerges, or the dependency dissolves. Both outcomes are clarity. See the pattern. Protect your energy. This is depth realm.